Hello everyone, welcome back to the Life's Good, and indeed welcome back to the pub under the stairs. I've been promising to do this for a while now. I introduced the pub under the stairs to the channel sometime before Christmas, and I've been talking about possibly introducing sort of how I make my beer type videos and what I do with the pub and how I have created all of this and so on and so forth. I've just poured myself a cheeky little Woodford's Wherry, and very nice it is too. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a tickle. Any excuse. I make my own beer and cider, and indeed our hedgerow or fruit wines and other wines. And I predominantly use beer kits. That's the pre-packaged or pre-made kits that provide you with the opportunity to make beer at home similar to what you would get in a pub, and some basic apparatus and some kits and a few bits and pieces, and away you go. So that's what I do, and that's what I wanted to introduce to my channel and all of you. So I'm going to do a little bit of a tour of the pub for you, show you my setup here, and then go on to basic equipment and getting started with your first beer kit. And I have got a beer kit here to make, which I will do in a while. I'll get out the way, I'll bring you in closer, and I'll show you what's happening in here. As we look at the floor, you can see I've got two buckets. Now, that far one's empty. That one's an empty, clean bucket, and we will be using that this evening to start off another brew. That one, I've already made my cerveza kit in there, and you can probably hear it already bubbling away, and I'll pop you in close and let you see what's happening in that bubbler on top of that bucket. You can see the top of the bucket, and I've actually got a little label here that I've handwritten to say what's inside, and this I will hang around the top of my keg when the beer's in the keg, so I know what's inside the keg as well. But I've got me a little label, and this is what we call a bubbler or an airlock. And as we speak, I can see that the air bubbles, well, it's not air actually, it's CO2 being given off by the fermentation process, is working its way up the stem of this bubble valve. It's forcing its way around here and forcing the liquid, which in this case is just water, around the bend at the bottom, and the air, or the CO2, bubbles up through the top of this little valve. The idea being is it actually stops air returning back in and getting onto the surface of the beer. So you're protecting that from any sort of bacteria and other nasties that could get on the surface of the beer and spoil it. So the beer's fermenting, it's giving off CO2, comes up through this valve and is given off through the top of the valve. Sitting on the two shelves above those two buckets, I've got my 3 kegs. I find 3 kegs very convenient, and I'm able to sort of have a controlled rotation of beer, mostly, by using these 3 kegs. Now, I have had a situation where I wasn't quite ready to fill another keg, so what I've got here at the moment is that's my Woodford Wherry in the keg on the lower shelf. And the ruby red in that keg there, that's almost finished. There's a couple more pints left in the bottom of that, and then I will be going on to drinking this, although I've had a sample of that this evening. The keg on the left is empty, and I've rinsed it, washed it. It does need sterilising before it gets used. And the cerveza in that bucket on the floor, when that's finished fermenting, will be put into that keg, and that keg will be used to decant that cerveza beer in the coming weeks. That is basically my pub setup, where I've got the 2 buckets on the floor. From the buckets, they get put into one of these barrels. Then when the barrel's empty, it gets cleansed, sterilised, and the next bucketful gets put in. So I'll find that I'm using this keg at the moment. When that's expired, I move on to this one. When that's expired, I move on to that one. and again from that one to that one. So the rotation tends to go clockwise, although if I do have a little bit of a sort of a gathering or a couple of friends round and we manage to drink quite a bit of a barrel, we end up with the scenario we've got at the moment, where I've actually got 2 barrels that are needing replenishment. As I was saying a moment ago, you will need some basic equipment, and a little note on that is that you can pay a lot of money for some equipment, particularly the kegs, which have a tap, a cap and a valve. These king kegs can be quite expensive, so if you are new to this and you're getting your first bit of equipment together to make your first beer batch, you will have to spend a little bit of money to get some basic equipment. However, most of my equipment I purchased on Gumtree recently, and indeed Facebook Marketplace, where people had brewing equipment, bits and pieces, no longer required, and they were selling them quite cheaply on those market forums. So a keg like this one, brand new with the valve and the tap, you can easily pay probably £55 to £60 for one of these. I bought this one for £20 on Gumtree, complete with everything. It's absolutely perfect. I had to wash it, sterilize it, and I started using it, and it's been absolutely fine. So shop around, have a look about. You'll probably find some kegs especially, and maybe even the brew bucket on Gumtree. People have these things sitting around, they decide to sell them, and if you're lucky, you can get a lot of equipment quite cheaply. But what do you really need? There is a lot of specialist equipment available. You don't need fancy gear to start with. What you need is a bucket. This bucket will hold, I believe, 25 litres. It's written on the side. 25 litre bucket with a lid. And the lid on this bucket also has a sealed hole in which I put the bubble valve. Now, you don't have to use the bubble valve, but I do recommend you do. It's a good way of releasing the CO2 and not letting the air in. It's also a way of telling if the beer has finished fermenting. Without hydrometers and bits and pieces, the lack of bubbles bubbling through here is the telltale sign that that beer is now ready for the next stage. So you need a bucket, a 25 litre bucket with a lid, and you will need a bubble valve. You don't have to, but you should have a bubble valve with that. In order to mix the beer up and get it going in there, you will need a long-handled spoon. One of these white plastic or nylon plastic spoons is ideal. It reaches the bottom of the bucket quite easily, and you're able to stir your mixture as you're putting it together with your spoon. You will need some sterilizer. I use this Ritchie's sterilizer. There are other products on the market that Young's, Wilkinson's do their own, the Wilco brand. There's loads. I just happen to buy these ones. Convenient sized pot. I do a lot of sterilizing, so I need quite a bit of sterilizer. You can use the baby type sterilizers. I tend to fight shy of those because they are sort of chlorinated, bleach type cleansers, and they can ultimately damage rubber seals and even leave a slight taste in the plastic, which you don't want in your beer. And any residue of the bleach type product left in these buckets and barrels will kill the yeast. Be cautious if you're using that. These type products, they're not expensive and they are absolutely perfect for sterilizing this equipment. So you, excuse me, you will need some sterilizer. You will need a siphon kit, so when this is finished working, a little siphon kit which consists of a length of clear plastic tubing and what I call the siphon wand, and you should have one that's got a little siphon trap on the bottom, and this you will use to get the beer from your bucket into your barrel or your bottles if that's the way you're going to go. So a siphon kit, and I happen to have a little clip with this one. I bought this separately. This little clip clips on the side of the bucket and holds this in place while you're siphoning the beer into the keg. I will show you that operation when I come to do it. The keg itself, this is a King keg, that's the brand name. There are other manufacturers, and indeed Wilkinson's make one. Lots of other companies make them. They're out there. As I said, they can be expensive. Whatever you do, get one that's got the 4-inch lid, the large lid, screw on. The large lid with the built-in valve. It's got a brass valve in here. They've got rubber seals in here, and this is a protection just in case this gets overpressured, and it will release the pressure. 4-inch, because you will need to get your hand in here at some time for cleaning and for access to the tap, or indeed the nut on the inside that holds the tap in place. A 2-inch neck is too small. You will not get your hand inside to clean it properly, and you'll have all manner of problems trying to change taps, that sort of thing. So please, please, please do yourself a favour, get the 4-inch size cap, the big cap one. Taps. This has got a standard type plastic tap on the front, which you turn one way for on and back the other way for off. There are other taps. That's a black one. That's a white one. You can see that a bit closer there, look. And you just swing it to one side to turn it on and back to turn it off. You do have an element of control from slow to fast. I find these a bit hard to use. I've got arthritis in my thumbs and wrists. These I find a bit uncomfortable, and I have purchased some new taps recently, but I'll come on to the new taps later on. You will get a bog standard tap with your keg. And in addition to all of that, you're going to need a beer kit. I tonight have got this Geordie Bitter kit. It makes 40 pints of beer. It cost me £12. It's got the yeast in here and a little sachet inside the lid and a set of instructions in here. You are also going to need some sugar, 1 kilo of sugar per kit. Do not use your ordinary household granulated sugar. It is made up of a combination of sugars and does have or could have some other impurities in it, and it will sweeten your beer. You will taste the sweetness and could possibly change the flavour of the beer from the manufacturer's original intention. I recommend that you only use specific brewing sugar, and you can get these from various outlets. You can get it online as well, but your wine and beer making, your brewing sugar is pure dextrose. This will not sweeten your product. Household sugars will. So please use 1 kilo of brewing sugar. Slightly more expensive than your household sugar, but the end result is much better. So, shall we go ahead and put this kit together tonight? I think we should. So this evening I will show you how quick and easy it is to put these ingredients together in the bucket and start off your 40 pints of home brew. Okay, let's see how quick we can do this. Remove the lid from your kit. You will find inside a small instruction leaflet, and a packet of yeast. And the tin itself contains the base ingredient, or the wort, if you like to call it that. This you need to stand in hot water for about 10 minutes. I've got some hot water in the sink. I'm just going to pop that in there for about 10 minutes to help soften the contents of the tin. After about 10 or 15 minutes, the contents of the tin should be soft enough to pour into your bucket. So we remove it from the water. I use a tea towel just to wipe it, and you'll note that the label has come off. When you soak these tins in the hot water, the paper labels tend to come off. I wipe them clean to make sure there's no glue and paper left on here that are going to fall into your beer. So you now need to open this and pour it into your bucket. And in the meantime, you need to be boiling your kettle. You can see how thick this is now. I'm going to just pour that into my clean and sterile bucket. Now I'm just going to turn the can and retain the dregs in here, and I'm going to decant some boiling water into this tin. About 3/4 of a can, and the rest of the kettle's going in the bucket. Use a spoon to give the tin a little stir. Now remember, this is boiling water in here, and this tin will get very hot. The idea is to rinse all of that sticky substance out of that tin. There you go, it's all dissolved into the water now. I'll put my spoon back into the bucket. And one last thing I do, bear with me, I hold the lid with a pair of tongs and I dip it into the can, into the boiling water, and get all the remaining sticky mixture off of that lid. There we go. And in with the rest of the ingredients in there. And I use the tea towel to hold this can because it's now hot, and this also now I'm going to pour into the bucket. And that can is now nice and clean. We've got all of the ingredients in the bucket. I'm going to add one more kettle full of boiling water to the bucket. And stir this really well to dissolve all that mixture and mix it with the water. And we can now add the sugar. The 1 kilo of brewing sugar can now go into the bucket. I'll just pour it all the way around into this boiling water mix, and again give it a good stir to get it all dissolved and all mixed together. I use the tin to top up this now. I let the tap run and I keep adding cold water and give it a stir, and you keep doing that. Give it a stir. You keep doing this until you reach the 23 litre or 40 pint level on the bucket. It is indicated on the side of the bucket. These buckets designed for home brewing have all the figures on the side so you can see exactly how much quantity you've got inside the bucket. And I'm going to keep topping this up until I reach 23 litres. The yeast is in this small foil sachet that comes with the kit. It's usually tucked inside the lid of the kit. And all you do with this, it's a very fine granulated yeast in here, and you just sprinkle it evenly on the surface of this liquid, just like so. And that is the alchemy of the whole thing. The yeast will now activate and react with the sugars in the mixture. They eat the sugar and release alcohol into the mixture, as well as CO2. And it's the CO2 that bubbles off, is released from the surface and exits the bucket via the bubbler in the lid. All we have to do now is add the lid. I always put the vent hole next to the little groove where you can actually get hold of the lid to remove it from the bucket. That's an indication to me. Put the lid on nice and tight. Add the bubbler, which has got some water in here. That just pushes down into that hole. And I've got a little label here, Geordie bitter, and I'm going to stand this in the little pub under the stairs in that cupboard where it's quite warm. It stays between 18 and 20 degrees Celsius in there, which is very comfortable, and that's ideal for this to ferment. So within 24 hours I would expect to see bubbles of CO2 bubbling through this little bubble valve. So we'll pop this away and I'll have a final word with you in just a moment. Well, I do hope you found that interesting and useful. If you are thinking of starting making your own beer at home, it is so easy with the pre-prepared kits like the Geordie Bitter kit that I've used today. There are so many kits out there. There are more expensive kits. They get a little bit more technical. You can add hops, you can use spray malts. There's all manner of things that you can do with these kits to adjust them, improve them, so on and so forth. But for the time being, if you want to start making some beer at home that is very palatable, very enjoyable, then a basic beer kit, a bucket, a barrel, a couple of other bits and pieces, and away you go. It's not that difficult, and I suppose it takes me about 20 minutes to half an hour from start to finish to make a bucket full of beer to put in the cupboard. It will now stay in this cupboard in the pub under the stairs for 7 to 10 days. It depends. The temperature and so on and so forth can affect the fermentation. But I now have to wait for that bucket full of beer to finish fermenting before I can put it into the keg. And I will bring you back and show you how I go about doing that in a week or so's time. So, thanks for watching. Thanks for popping in and seeing us. And if it's your first time here, please do hit the subscribe button in the corner there. Now, I do a lot of gardening videos. We've got the plot outside, so the life's good in the garden, and in addition, we've got the pub under the stairs. I'm going to try and keep them separate. I will probably try and do the beer making, wine making and so on midweek, and the gardening and all the other things on the weekend. We'll see how it goes, but when this beer is ready for barreling, I will bring you back and show you how I go about doing that. So in the meantime, you look after each other, you stay safe, you be happy, and please, please, please come back and see us soon. We'd love to have you back here in the Life's Good, and indeed in the pub under the stairs. Cheers! Bye bye.